What happens when a sarcastic, red-haired maid crashes into the life of a cold, emotionally scarred lawyer with a tray of hot coffee and no filter? Clara Monroe wasn't looking for love, and Julian Westbrook definitely wasn't ready to feel again. But one ridiculous kiss contract, 17 arguments, and a heartbreaking misunderstanding later, they discover something real in the mess. This story is fiery, funny, and full of moments that will melt your heart. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable love stories. Clara Monroe stood at the wrought iron gate of the Westbrook estate, gripping the handle of her suitcase so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The suitcase, overstuffed, battle-scarred, and probably held together by nothing but sheer hope, tilted sideways, threatening to topple under the weight of her poor life choices. She glanced up at the towering estate with its vine-wrapped columns and ridiculously polished windows and muttered, "If I break anything in there, I'll need to sell a kidney to pay for it." The gate creaked open, with the kind of ominous groan you only hear in haunted house movies, and Clara dragged her suitcase up the pristine cobblestone path. Her wild red hair whipped around her face as the wind picked up, and she tried to convince herself she was ready for this. Temporary housemaid. That's all. Just clean, avoid conversation, and don't look rich people in the eye. Easy. She took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. The woman who answered looked like she'd been pulled straight from a Gothic novel. "You must be Miss Monroe," she said, pursing her lips like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "You're late by 2 minutes." "I'm early by 3 if you're going by my watch," Clara replied with a crooked grin. The woman didn't laugh. "I'm Mrs. Bell, the housekeeper. Mr. Westbrook is in his study. You are to take him this coffee. Black, no sugar, white porcelain cup. If you spill it, don't come back." "Got it. No pressure." Clara picked up the silver tray, balancing it like she was carrying nuclear codes. She turned toward the grand staircase, every step echoing off the marble like a countdown to disaster. The house was silent, intimidating, and smelled like old money and floor polish. Clara kept her gaze forward, focused on the task. She reached the top of the stairs, the coffee still safely in hand, when suddenly the door to the study burst open. A tall man stormed out, eyes locked on something behind him, moving too fast to notice her. Clara barely had time to say, "Oh no," before they collided. The tray flipped. The porcelain cup sailed like a doomed bird and splashed its contents directly onto the stack of papers in the man's hands. The crash of breaking ceramic echoed like a gunshot. She froze. Time stilled. All she could see were the soaking pages, the dripping ink, and the man standing before her, with the most terrifying expression she had ever seen. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored black suit, with hair slicked back and eyes cold enough to freeze hell over. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, his voice low and sharp. Clara dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the broken pieces. "Oh my God, I am so sorry, I didn't mean to. Please don't fire me, or sue me, or kill me." "That," he said, holding up the soaked documents, "was a multi-million-dollar contract. You just turned it into a coffee sponge." Clara blinked. "Multi-million? Are you printing them in platinum ink?" She realized she was arguing with her boss and shut up, too late. He narrowed his eyes. "What's your name?" "Clara Monroe. And you must be Julian Westbrook, the famously charming lawyer with the warmth of a brick." His jaw twitched. "You're bold. And you're dramatic. But fine. Dock my pay. Fire me. Whatever." She stood, brushing her skirt. "But next time, maybe don't charge out of your study like a bat out of hell." Julian stared at her for a moment too long. Then he turned on his heel and disappeared back into his study. Clara stood alone, heart racing, ankle deep in coffee and ceramic, and muttered, "So, day 1 went great." Clara Monroe wasn't sure what was worse, Julian Westbrook's silence or his smirk. Since the coffee disaster, he hadn't said much, but the next morning she found a sleek black notebook on the kitchen counter with one phrase written neatly on the first page: "Kiss debt ledger." Below that, in clean, lawyerly handwriting, "Mistake number 1, coffee incident, 1 kiss owed." She nearly choked on her cereal. Mrs. Bell gave her a side-eye when Clara asked if it was a joke. "Mr. Westbrook doesn't joke," she replied flatly, as she arranged silverware with military precision. But later that afternoon, Julian cornered Clara in the study, arms crossed, lips twitching with that infuriating not quite a smile. You agreed, he said coolly, to the terms yesterday. I didn't agree, Clara shot back. You proposed it while I was having a panic attack in a puddle of caffeine. Silence implies consent, he countered. That's not how consent works. In law, sometimes it is. You're the worst. Julian didn't flinch. Cheek or forehead, Miss Monroe? Clara groaned and stomped up to him, glaring like she was about to punch him instead. Fine, but this doesn't mean you win. She kissed his cheek, barely a peck, and immediately turned to flee. Behind her, she heard him mutter, "That's one." The next few days turned into a bizarre, slow-motion battle of wills. Clara did her best to work flawlessly, polishing everything until it sparkled, folding towels with corners so crisp they could cut glass. But no matter how hard she tried, her natural clumsiness kept betraying her. She accidentally put Julian's shoes in the wrong closet. She placed the guest towels in the master bathroom. She even mistook an urgent legal document for a napkin and used it to blot a spaghetti stain off the counter. That one earned a full 5 seconds of stunned silence from Julian, followed by mistake number 2. Each error meant another kiss. At first she tried to argue each one. That was not a real mistake, she insisted, pointing to the slightly crooked placemat. Julian just calmly opened his ledger, wrote, "Mistake number 3, asymmetrical table setting," and waited. Clara, fuming, leaned forward, kissed his forehead, and growled, "This is psychological warfare." Julian, infuriatingly calm, murmured, "So far, you're losing." One night, during an intense storm, the power flickered. Clara, thinking Julian was still working late, crept toward the study with a flashlight, intending to offer him a blanket or at least an awkward apology for earlier nearly tripping over his laptop charger. Instead, she found him asleep on the sofa, tie loosened, hair mussed, glasses askew. He looked human, tired, vulnerable, like a man carrying too much weight alone. She stared for a moment too long. Just as she turned to leave, Julian stirred, eyes fluttering open, confused. In the dark, he squinted at her silhouette and mumbled, "Natalie?" Clara blinked. "What?" Before she could step back, he reached out, cupped her cheek, and kissed her. It was soft, startling, not ledger kiss soft, real, warm, full of longing. She froze, then shoved him hard. "What the hell?" Julian snapped out of it immediately, blinking fast. "Clara, wait, I thought." She smacked him. Not gently. "You thought wrong," she shouted, voice shaking. "I'm not Natalie, or whoever you thought I was. And you don't get to just kiss people like that." Julian sat up slowly, rubbing the side of his face. "I was dreaming," he said quietly. "It wasn't intentional." "That makes it worse." Clara stormed out, heart pounding. She slammed the guest room door behind her and threw herself onto the bed, face burning. "Great," she muttered to the ceiling. "Now I'm in a kiss contract with a sleep-kissing lunatic. And the worst part? That kiss wasn't even bad." Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, wide-eyed, replaying the kiss over and over. It wasn't just that Julian had kissed her by mistake. It was that for a few terrifying electric seconds, she hadn't wanted him to stop. And that realization kept her stomach in knots. By morning, she had convinced herself it was just a fluke, a weird blip in an otherwise mildly hostile work relationship. But when she passed Julian in the hallway, he looked at her, not cold, not stern, but distant, like a man who'd opened a door he didn't mean to. Neither of them spoke. The silence grew heavier by the hour. By noon, Clara needed an escape. She slipped into the estate's back library, her secret refuge from mopping and emotional confusion. She trailed her fingers along rows of dusty books, letting the scent of paper and forgotten time calm her nerves. A loose cabinet door in the corner caught her eye. Curiosity pulled her in. Inside was a small wooden box marked personal. It wasn't locked, and Clara had never claimed to be a saint. She opened the box. Inside were photographs, old letters, and a velvet ring box. One photo floated to the top. Julian, younger and lighter, with a dazzling smile she'd never seen in real life. His arm was wrapped around a blonde woman with elegant features and twinkling eyes. They looked happy, radiant. The kind of happiness that only comes when you think forever is guaranteed. On the back of the photo, in looping cursive, "Julian and Natalie, summer 2020 forever." Clara sat down hard. Natalie. The name he whispered the night before. She sifted through more. One was a newspaper clipping from a society column dated 2 years ago. Top attorney Julian Westbrook calls off wedding. The article speculated a disagreement, cold feet, or maybe According to one anonymous source, Julian had pushed her away, afraid of commitment. Clara stared at the ring box but didn't open it. Her fingers hovered above it for a second, then retreated. She returned everything carefully, guilt curling inside her like smoke. She hadn't meant to snoop, but now she knew. Natalie wasn't an ex. She was the ex, the one who left a scar. That evening, while dusting the piano in the formal lounge, Julian entered without warning. Clara stiffened, her back to him. She could feel the tension in the air, as real and heavy as the antique chandelier above them. "You found the box," Julian said quietly. She turned slowly, heart in her throat. "I didn't mean to. It was open." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I figured. I heard you in the library." There was a pause, awkward, pulsing with things unsaid. "She was beautiful," Clara said gently, unsure if it was her place. "She was everything I thought I wanted," Julian replied, "until she decided she wanted something else. Something freer. She left me a week before the wedding." Clara swallowed. "You still loved her?" Julian's eyes darkened. "I thought I did, but truth is, I loved the idea of her, the idea of control, predictability. She made sense, on paper." Clara folded her arms, not trusting her voice. She didn't want to feel bad for him, but she did. Julian looked at her, gaze uncharacteristically soft. "You're the opposite of control, Clara, and that terrifies me." She let out a shaky laugh. "You think I'm chaos? I know you are. And yet you kissed me." "That night?" His lips twitched. "I thought you were a ghost." Clara stepped closer, chin raised. "Well, newsflash, I'm alive. I spill things, I snoop, I argue, but I'm not a memory. If you want a ghost, I suggest calling a medium." Julian smiled, really smiled, and it took her breath away. "Ghost," he said. "I want someone real." Clara didn't say anything. She just nodded, heart pounding in her chest like a drumline. For the first time since she entered the mansion, she felt seen, not as a mistake or a mess, but as herself. And she didn't hate it. The next few days passed like Clara was stuck in some alternate universe, a quiet, awkward, not quite romantic purgatory, where every glance from Julian made her chest tighten and every silence stretched too long to be comfortable. The kiss ledger was gone, literally. She found it in the trash bin outside the kitchen, torn halfway down the spine, like it had been chucked there during a moment of frustration or regret, maybe both. He hadn't mentioned it. Neither had she. The game was over, and neither of them knew what to do without it. Still, something had changed. Julian started showing up in the kitchen more often, claiming to check the inventory while silently sipping coffee she'd made without being asked. She, in turn, stopped pretending she didn't care if he liked his eggs scrambled with herbs or plain. She cooked them right, folded his newspapers neatly, left post-its with sarcastic smiley faces on them. It was the closest thing to peace they'd ever had, and it terrified her. One afternoon, while humming off-key and organizing the spice cabinet, Clara heard the sound of tires on gravel. A car door slammed. Then came a knock. She wiped her hands on her apron and padded barefoot to the front door, expecting Mrs. Bell returning early or maybe a delivery guy. Instead, her heart dropped. There, swaying slightly in the breeze with a crooked smile and far too much cologne, stood Ethan. Her Ethan. Or rather, the Ethan who had ghosted her 6 months ago and vanished without so much as a sorry. The same Ethan who once said, "You're too much for me, Clara." And now here he was, on the doorstep of her chaos-free life, holding a single wilted rose like it could erase everything. "Clara," he breathed, eyes wide. "God, I've missed you." She blinked. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I made a mistake," he said, stepping closer. "I never should have left. I was scared, okay? But I see it now. You're it. You always were." "I'm sorry. Did you take a wrong turn on your way to Regretville?" Clara stepped back, ready to slam the door in his face, but a voice behind her froze her solid. "Everything okay here, Julian?" He stood at the base of the stairs, hair slightly damp from a shower, buttoning the cuff of his white shirt. His eyes locked onto Ethan like a silent, well-tailored warning. "Who's this?" Julian asked, voice cool. Ethan blinked at him, then at Clara. "Seriously, the maid's sleeping with the boss now?" Clara's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" Julian stepped forward, his tone suddenly much less lawyerly and much more personal. "You need to leave." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Wow, you've got her cleaning floors and warming your bed? Classy." That was the last straw. Clara moved faster than she thought possible. snatching the rose from Ethan's hand and smacking him across the chest with it. You don't get to show up, insult me, and pretend the past never happened. You've changed, Ethan muttered. Clara crossed her arms. No. I just finally found someone who sees me as more than a mistake. Ethan scoffed but turned and left, muttering something under his breath. When the door closed, Clara leaned back against it, pulse racing. Julian stood silently for a moment, then said softly, "So that was Ethan?" "Yeah," she replied. "A blast from the forgettable past." Julian hesitated. "Did he mean what he said about you and me?" Clara looked up, her throat dry. "I don't know. Did he?" Julian stepped closer, the air between them thick with things unsaid. "I threw the ledger away, Clara. Not because I stopped wanting your kisses, but because I didn't want them to be owed anymore." Her breath caught. "I want them," he continued, "because you want to give them." Clara blinked, heart lurching. Then she whispered, "So ask me." Julian smiled, quiet, real. "Clara Monroe, will you kiss me? No contracts, no ledgers, just you and me." She didn't answer. She leaned up on her toes, grabbed his collar, and kissed him like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, she grinned. "That one's free." Julian looked dazed. "I'm still keeping tally." She rolled her eyes. "Of course you are." Clara Monroe had always believed in grand exits. So naturally, when she slipped out of the Westbrook estate at dawn, she did it with dramatic flair. Handwritten resignation letter folded precisely in half. No return address, no kiss goodbye. Just a single line scribbled at the bottom. "I've paid all my kisses, Julian. You don't owe me anything." She slid it into the estate's mailbox, took one last look at the towering mansion behind her, and walked away, her chest tight and her eyes dry, too numb to cry. The night before had shattered her. She had been humming, barefoot in the kitchen, arranging a breakfast tray with Earl Grey tea, toast, and a small vase with a single daisy, Julian's quiet favorite. After that kiss by the door, the night he came to her apartment soaked in rain and truth, Clara had finally let herself believe this thing between them was real. No ledgers, no ghosts, just him and her. But as she neared the study, she'd seen it. Through the cracked door, Lydia, was wrapped around Julian like time hadn't passed at all. Her blonde hair was resting on his shoulder. Her arms, those perfect, polished arms, looped around his neck. Julian stood still, too still. He didn't push her away. He didn't speak. And to Clara, frozen in the hallway, it felt like betrayal. The tray slipped from her hands, porcelain shattered, tea spilled, and Julian turned too late. "Clara," he called, startled, stepping back from Lydia, eyes wide. "It's not what it looks like." But she was already gone. She didn't stop running until she reached her tiny apartment. The walls seemed smaller than before, the air too still. She collapsed onto the couch, clutching a pillow like it could hold her together. Everything ached, her heart, her pride, her trust. She wanted to scream, but instead she grabbed a pen and scrawled her goodbye in messy, angry ink. She'd been a fool. She thought she was different, special. But in the end, she was just a replacement for the woman who'd come before. The real one. The one with history and matching smiles and old photographs. Now morning sun poured through the window of her cramped kitchen, mocking her with warmth she couldn't feel. She curled up on the couch with a mug of lukewarm cocoa, her throat raw from silence. "You really did it this time, Monroe," she muttered. "Fell for the boss. The brooding, emotionally unavailable, painfully handsome boss." She was still sitting there when the knock came. It wasn't loud, just a firm, steady knock, like a punctuation mark. Clara groaned and shuffled to the door, half expecting her landlady demanding rent or a neighbor returning a wrongly delivered package. She swung it open and froze. Julian stood there in the rain, hair wet, shirt clinging to him like some ridiculous scene from a slow-burn romance. In his hand, the infamous kiss ledger, crumpled but still intact. His eyes, stormy and wild, locked onto hers. "You ran," he said softly. "You didn't stop me. I didn't get the chance." She folded her arms, fighting the emotion rising in her throat. "I saw her, Julian. Lydia, you were holding her." "She hugged me. I didn't hug her back." He stepped forward, rain dripping from his sleeves. "She showed up unannounced. I didn't invite her in, and the moment you walked away I shoved her off, but you didn't let me explain." Clara blinked, stunned. Julian opened the kiss ledger and held it between them. 17 kisses. Paid in full. "But I don't want it to end." I want you to keep breaking things, messing up my schedule, rearranging my perfectly ordered world. She stared at him. Why? Because with you I feel alive, and I haven't felt alive in a very long time. Clara took a shaky breath. You broke my heart, Julian. I came here to fix it. They stood in silence. Then Clara stepped forward, touched his cheek and whispered, one condition. Anything. No more ledgers, he smiled. Deal. And when she kissed him, there was no tally. No contract, just love, real and messy and entirely theirs. Some stories aren't just about romance, they're about rediscovery. The kiss clause isn't really about a quirky maid and a cold-hearted lawyer falling in love. It's about what happens when two broken people, both hiding behind control and sarcasm, learn to let go. Clara and Julian didn't fall for each other because they were perfect. They fell because they were real. She was messy, impulsive, and loud. He was rigid, guarded, and terrified of vulnerability. But in each other, they found the one person who didn't try to fix them, just chose to stay. This story reminds us that love isn't measured by grand gestures or flawless moments. It's found in the small things. A shared laugh in the kitchen, a kiss that doesn't need a ledger, a moment of silence where someone stays instead of walking away. Real love isn't about perfection, it's about presence, about choosing someone again and again, even when it's hard, even when you're scared. It also reminds us that people carry history, grief, and fears that aren't always visible. But healing can happen, slowly, quietly, when someone chooses to see past the damage and love what's left anyway. So, wherever you are listening from, what city or country are you watching this story from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another heartwarming journey like this one.